7 incredible messages exposed in the Bible, divine truths that transform faith forever. In the 3rd year of Jehoiakim, King David had mounted a mighty vision to return the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, where it belonged. The echoes of ancient prophecies hung over the city like a sacred cloud, promising the presence of the Almighty would dwell among His chosen people. An air of electrifying excitement coursed through every street as banners waved and the citizens, the beloved of God, swarmed the sunlit paths, chanting David's name. He was their shepherd, chosen by God, the man after His own heart, leading them not just in realm but in worship. The ark was placed carefully upon an ox-drawn cart. The rhythm of hoofbeats accompanied every cheer, the sound echoing like thunder through the valleys. Yet, as joy swelled in the city, an unseen tension thickened the air. Suddenly, the oxen stumbled, and in that tragic moment, Uzzah, a faithful Levite, instinctively reached out to steady the sacred object. His hand touched the ark, an act of seemingly innocent devotion, but it met with divine wrath. He was struck dead. The stance of the people, once spirited, froze. King David stood trembling, fear gripped his heart, and the joyous procession halted at the threshold of his beloved city. "How could I bring the presence of the Almighty into my humble abode?" he questioned, a mere king, paralyzed by the enormity of such a divine encounter. An immediate spiritual lesson unfurled before David. God's holiness must be revered and approached with a careful heart. Rethinking this pivotal moment, he recalled the sacred commands entrusted to the Levites about the ark's care, analogous to approaching God Himself. The tremor of fear began to be overshadowed by understanding, igniting within him a determination not to be ruled by dread. This was a time to celebrate, to worship in truth, not just ritual. With fervor renewed, he rebuilt the procession and cast aside his fear. Before the ark, David danced, unburdened by royal decorum, attired only in an ephod that proclaimed true humility before God. His heart exulted, and the joyful cries of the people mingled in a melody of pure worship. But not all viewed David's extravagant devotion with favor. Michal, his wife, glared from her window. Disdain filled her heart as she witnessed what she deemed reckless enthusiasm, a display unworthy of a king. "Have you no sense of dignity?" she later reproached him. Yet David would not be swayed. From his humble abode in the presence of the ark, the truth rang luminous. Devotion to God may invite ridicule, yet the heart of worship, boundless and sincere, cannot be contained. As the grateful revelry continued, echoes of God's promises to David rumbled in the depths of his spirit. He remembered the covenant made with him, that his lineage would endure. Embracing this promise, the understanding echoed loudly. God's grace is always greater than human failing. Tension began to dissipate as they reached the city of David. The ark was placed into a newly erected tent, signifying God's fervent desire to dwell intimately among His people. Not merely a dwelling, but a symbol of divine proximity. When David and his people erupted in joyous celebration, it was clear they were transformed not as individuals, but as a community linked in worship, a collective faith pouring forth in song and dance. Through their jubilant expressions, it became evident. Collective worship does not merely uplift individuals, but can reforge entire communities in the spirit of faith. Yet, even as drums beat and voices raised in unison, David sensed a lingering divine mystery. As praises filled the air, the atmosphere became thick with soaring spiritual weight. The 7th incredible truth: sacrifices of praise usher in transformative power. Questions hung thickly in the air, like the divine essence they celebrated. What would God illuminate in their hearts? With hopes elevated and expectancy high, the journey of worship held the promise of endless revelations, both for them and for generations yet to come. Before we continue with this incredible biblical account, I want to make sure you don't miss any of these powerful scripture stories. Click the bell icon and select All Notifications. These biblical narratives have transformed countless lives throughout history. If God's word through this story is blessing you, please like and share with someone who needs to hear about God's faithfulness today. Tell me in the comments, which biblical story has most impacted your faith journey? I'm always amazed how God's word speaks to hearts across generations. Now, let's continue with what the Lord did next. As the celebration surged through the city of David, resounding with unbroken joy, the unfurling story of worship held in its midst a tantalizing question. What divine truths lay in wait just beyond the threshold of their understanding? The dance of praise had only just begun. But, amidst the exuberance, David could not shake the weight of the moment when Uzzah fell. His heart wrestled with the dichotomy of joy and fear, reverence and celebration. Flashes of the past surged through his mind like waves crashing on the shore. His battles, his failures, and the promises woven into the very fabric of his kingship. As he stood before the ark, the towering tent a sign of God's presence, David yearned for clarity. He gathered the people and spoke with fervor that resonated deep within their souls. The Lord our God is holy. We must walk in his ways. Let us not forget our covenant with him. His love extends, but his holiness requires our respect. His voice echoed through the hearts of the people, igniting a flame within that could not be quenched. With his command, the priests, clad in their linen robes, approached the ark. They reverently lifted the sacred treasures within the holy box, arranging them with intricate care, while David's gaze remained upon the heavenly monument of God's promise. The sight stirred something profoundly deep within him, a reminder of the sacred history, the tablets of the law that guided their journey, the rod of Aaron that had budded, and the manna that fed them in the wilderness. As they offered sacrifices of bulls and peace offerings, a cloud of incense filled the air, curling toward heaven. The sweet aroma was a pleasing fragrance to the Almighty. The people fell down before their God, recognizing the weight of what was happening, a reconnection, a renewal of their bond with Yahweh. In this act, they not only sought forgiveness, but also hoped for a clearer understanding of their future. In the midst of this sacred gathering, David's heart thrummed with expectation, gazing at his people bathed in divine light. He felt the Spirit of God stirring again, reminding him of Nathan's prophetic words, the lineage promised, the kingdom established forever. Such thoughts swirled through his mind, whispering of hope and future grace. Yet just as the air glimmered with divine delight, beneath the surface an undercurrent of turmoil began to swirl. Michal, embittered by David's fervent worship, remained entrenched in her disdain. How could he dance so shamelessly before the ark? She pondered, seething in silence. Her heart, hardened by skepticism, failed to see the divine revelation unfolding before them. David, sensing her gaze upon him, turned his face toward her window. "I will celebrate before the Lord. I will be more undignified than this," he exclaimed, unashamed in his worship. The people rejoiced, their hearts echoing his fervor. Yet Michal watched with narrowed eyes, her thoughts churning. What began as a celebration hinted at a deeper divide, a separation between the joy of a heart set aflame by God and a spirit constrained by human judgment. As the night deepened, the festivities continued without ceasing. David led his people in songs that echoed through the valleys and climbed to the heavens. They sang of the grace of their God, the deliverance in times past, and the covenant assurances alive in their midst. But the dawn would not come without its revelation. Questions loomed large like thunderclouds on the horizon. Would the kingdom David cherished endure the trials ahead? What challenges awaited in the shadow of the ark, where the presence of God resided? Thus, as twilight seeped into dawn, the hearts of the people grew heavy with mystery. They were caught between the joy of God's presence and the foreboding sense of trials ahead. David understood that sacrifices were being made, not just in the offerings, but in their lives, the unveiling of a path fraught with lessons yet to be taught. What awaited them as they journeyed further into God's holiness? What divine plan lay hidden, designed to shape and forge a nation into the likeness of God's heart? The celebration may have been infectious, but the lessons were still unfolding.
each note of praise echoing with the weight of a covenant so profound. And so the story steered onwards, leading David and his people into deeper mysteries, a journey gripped by both divine purpose
and human frailty, waiting for the promise of the living God to be revealed in their midst. And it came to pass that when the people had returned to their homes, there arose a great whisper among the tribes of Israel, for David had brought forth the ark of the covenant, and with it a new hope that ignited their spirits. Yet within the palace the atmosphere turned heavy with unresolved tension as Michal cast her gaze upon David, her heart embittered and questioning. David, filled with the radiance of the Lord's presence, determined to seek the counsel of God. He gathered his trusted leaders, and they convened in the tent where the ark had been placed. "Let us inquire of the Lord," David urged, "for in his wisdom lies the path we must tread." And so they prayed with one accord, lifting their voices to the heavens. "Speak to us, O Lord, and reveal your will," they proclaimed, a chorus seeking direction from the Almighty. As they waited, the silence was palpable, an electric charge in the air, each heart beating in anticipation. At length, the Spirit of God stirred within the tent, and the high priest Abiathar rose with the Urim and Thummim clasped in his hands. "The Lord has heard our petition," he declared, his voice steady but reverent. He says, "Build me a house, and I shall dwell among my people forever." Astonishment filled the room. "A house?" David murmured, contemplating the weight of such a command. He envisioned a magnificent temple, a dwelling place for the Most High, a physical representation of divine glory. Yet his thoughts were interwoven with uncertainty. Am I deserving of such a task? Then the Lord broke the stillness within his heart, speaking clarity and assurance. "Fear not, David, for I have chosen you and your lineage forever. Your son shall build the house, and I will establish his kingdom." With these words, joy surged like a river through David's soul, washing away the remnants of doubt. He understood that this promise was not solely for him, but for generations yet to come, a covenant of mercy that extended beyond his lifetime. "Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised," David exulted, falling to his knees in worship. As he rose, his spirit invigorated, he turned to Abiathar. "Let the people be informed of God's word. Let every tribe gather and hear the good news of his favor." Thus the people were called, drawn to the tent where the ark resided. They gathered with eager hearts, lines of families stretching toward the horizon, and David stood before them, the light of God illuminating his face. "O Israel," he proclaimed, "the Lord has spoken. He has chosen us to be his people, and through my lineage will he establish his everlasting kingdom. Prepare yourselves, for we are set upon a path paved with his promises." The response was a loud cheer, their spirits ignited with fervor, a mix of awe and ecstasy. Yet amidst the celebration a shadow lingered, Michal seething in her disappointment, her heart a stone against the warmth of divine revelation. "Why, O David, do you think you can orchestrate the will of God?" she scoffed, finally confronting him. David's gaze, filled with both resolute strength and love, met hers. "It is not for my glory, but for his. I will share in his joy, unashamed before my God." As the tension hung heavy in the air, the excitement simmered, mingled with the weight of impending trials. For even as the people danced and rejoiced, there was a simmering conflict brewing beyond the palace walls, a challenge that would seek to test the very fabric of their unity and faith. And so the dawn broke anew upon Israel, a time of promise intertwined with peril, as their hearts looked toward the future. The covenant carried at the heart of the ark beckoned, whispering of divine encounters yet to unfold. Little did the people know that through their worship and the unfolding of God's plan, shadows and light would intertwine, preparing them for a monumental revelation, the promise yet to come that would shift the course of their lives forever. And it came to pass that days turned into weeks, and the fervor of the people did not wane. As they gathered daily around the tent where the ark rested, they offered sacrifices and sang praises unto the Lord. Their hearts were drawn closer to the heavens, and the praises of Israel echoed throughout the land like unto the rushing of mighty waters. Yet in the solitude of the palace Michal grew restless. The joy of the people weighed heavily upon her, for she felt distanced from it all. "Why must they rejoice when the heart of my husband is distracted?" she pondered. The insecurity within her grew into an open wound, and she sought to confront David once more. One day, after David had come from a great feast celebrating the Lord's covenant and blessings, Michal approached him boldly. "O king," she said, her voice tinged with bitterness, "how glorious was the king of Israel today, dancing before the ark like a commoner! What dignity is there in such foolishness?" David, taken aback by her words, responded, "It was before the Lord, who chose me above your father and all his house, that I danced with all my might. For I will celebrate before him, and I will be even more undignified than this. It is for his glory that I live." And so a silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken words. Michal, unable to comprehend the depth of David's devotion, turned away, her heart further hardened. Yet, unknown to her, the Lord was working a greater plan, preparing David for the trials that lay ahead. For in the valleys beyond the city, enemies began to stir. The Philistines, rising from their slumber, sought once again to reclaim their former dominion over Israel. News reached David that their armies were gathering. Motivated by vengeance and determination. "Gather the men of Judah," David commanded his captains, a fire igniting in his chest. "We shall go forth to confront this threat, for our God is with us, and he will grant us victory." As the men armed themselves, David sought the wisdom of the Lord once more. Kneeling at the altar of the tent, he cried out, "O God of Israel, guide us against the uncircumcised. What shall I do?" The words of the Almighty echoed in his mind, the promise of a house lingering like a fragrant offering before the Lord. "Go, David," spoke a voice within, "for I shall deliver them into your hand." And so, with a heart steadfast and a spirit emboldened by divine encouragement, David set forth with his men. The skies darkened as the armies converged upon the valley, a stark reminder of the battles faced by the faithful. It was a day of reckoning, and as swords clashed and shouts of war filled the air, David called upon the name of the Lord. "You are my shield and my fortress, O God. Let not my enemies prevail." Amidst the chaos of battle, David's faith bore fruit. He saw the strength of the Lord manifest in mighty ways, and the tides turned. The Philistines faltered and fled, and David chased them, reclaiming the ground the Lord had given. As the sun set upon that day of victory, the hearts of the people swelled with gratitude, and David offered sacrifices of thanksgiving before the ark. Yet even in this triumph he pondered the words spoken to him by the high priest. "Lord," he prayed, "how can I build a house for you when you have called me to lead your people in battle?" And the Spirit of the Lord whispered softly to his soul, "Fear not, for this is but the beginning of your journey, and I will reveal to you the depths of my plans. The promise of a house holds greater mysteries yet unspoken." Thus, amidst the celebrations and the newfound unity, a greater divine mystery loomed on the horizon, waiting to be unveiled. A revelation that would not only change David, but also the course of all Israel. The promise of generations yet to come, lingering, whispering of hope, legacy, and the majesty of God's sovereign design. And it came to pass, after the swift victory over the Philistines, that David returned to the city of David with his men, their spirits high, and their hearts rejoicing in the faithfulness of the Lord. The sound of jubilant praise filled the air, the people gathering as if to welcome a king who had achieved great things by the hand of God. Yet, deep within David's heart, a conflict brewed. As the people celebrated, visions of a grand temple coursed through his mind, yet he felt unworthy,
realizing the task set before him was far greater than just leading armies. "Shall I dwell in a house of cedar,
while the ark of God dwells within curtains?" he queried passionately. That night, as he sat listening to the night winds whisper outside, David reflected upon the dealings of the Lord. "What is my house that you have brought me this far?" he prayed earnestly, his thoughts heavy with awe and humility. "You, O Lord, have made a covenant with me, yet I am but a shepherd molded after your own heart. What can I do for you?" As he spoke these words, a great calm filled the room, and the Lord's voice rang clear within David's spirit. "I have chosen you not only for valor in battle, but to be a shepherd of my people, Israel. Your redeeming acts echo throughout generations. I shall establish a house through you, a kingdom that shall never fall. Through your lineage, I will bring forth a king unlike any other." David's heart trembled at the promise. "O Lord, who am I that you should bless me so?" He fell to his knees, his hands raised in surrender. "I have been called to glorify your name, and by your grace I shall do so forever. Let not my inadequacies cloud the path you have set before me." Meanwhile, in the palace, Michal watched in silence, her heart torn between admiration and jealousy. She marveled at the joy radiating from the people as they rejoiced, yet deep within she felt the pang of loneliness amplify. She approached the window overlooking the crowd, observing the fervor with which David was venerated. "When shall my husband's heart return to me?" she lamented. In the stillness of the night she heard a whisper, the voice of the Spirit such as she had never encountered. "Your heart, Michal, is enshrouded in fear. Seek understanding in the dance of your husband, for he dances to the tune of my glory." As dawn broke, David assembled a council of his leaders, and he spoke boldly of his desire to build a house for the Lord. "There is a vision pressing upon my soul, a dwelling where the Lord might reside among his people. I will gather the finest materials, and we shall build a temple that reflects his holiness." But Nathan, the prophet, stood before him with an expression that weighed heavily. "Go, do all that is in your heart, for the Lord is with you," he initially encouraged, igniting a spark of hope. Yet that night the Lord spoke to Nathan, saying, "Go and tell my servant David, thus says the Lord, would you build a house for me to dwell in?" Nathan returned the next day, his heart pounding. "David, the Lord has declared that you shall not build him a temple, for your hands have spilled blood in battle. Instead, I shall establish your lineage. It is from your own son that the house of God will be built." David was shattered, yet filled with awe, for in the promise of a son came a revelation that transcended his own ambitions. "Lord," he implored, "your ways are past finding out. I will praise your name, for you are a God of mercy and grace, who sees beyond my frailty." And so the truth emerged amidst the shadows, a lineage destined to bring forth the Messiah, the true King who would eternally reign. During the rising of this unforeseen hope, all of Israel would witness the covenant of faithfulness that would draw them closer to the heart of God. Thus, as the days turned into seasons, David pondered the enormity of this divine plan. The realization gripped him. God's sovereign purpose was unfolding with profound depth, leaving more mysteries to unveil. A lineage sanctified for future generations, and the promise of a king yet to come. And it came to pass in the days that followed Nathan's revelation that David gathered the elders of Israel and spoke unto them with a voice filled with both reverence and joy. "Hear me, O leaders of my people. The Lord has revealed to me that though it is not I who shall build a temple, he will establish my house forever. His promises will unfold through my lineage." The elders listened intently, their hearts stirred by the weight of the proclamation. "We are witnesses to the covenant of the Almighty," David continued, "and we shall ensure that the ark of the Lord remains at the center of our worship, for it symbolizes His presence among us." Seeking the Lord's guidance, David called for the priests and the Levites and consecrated them to serve in the duties pertaining to the Ark of the Covenant. "Let us dedicate ourselves to the Lord, for He is worthy of our service, and let the ark be brought to its rightful place in the city of David," he proclaimed with great fervor. And so it was that David and the assembly prepared for a grand procession. David donned a linen ephod, and they danced before the Lord with all their might, shouts of joy and the sound of trumpets filling the air. The people clapped their hands, singing songs of praise. "For great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised." Yet, amidst the celebration, Michal observed from her window. Her heart was heavy, for she could not comprehend the fervor that captivated the people and her husband. She felt a fierce fire of both admiration and jealousy rise within her. "Is this king, my husband, lost in frivolity, blind to the dignity of his station?" she thought bitterly. And as David entered the city with the ark, jubilant voices surrounded him. But when he returned home, Michal met him with scorn. How glorious was the king of Israel today, uncovering himself like a worthless fellow, dancing before the maidservants? Her words dripped with contempt, yet David responded with the strength of his conviction. "It was before the Lord," he retorted, "who chose me over your father and all his house to appoint me as ruler over his people. I will yet be more vile than this, and will humble myself in my own sight. But as for the maidservants of whom you have spoken, they shall honor me." David's heart was resolute, for he understood that in the eyes of God, humility and joy in worship far outweighed earthly perceptions. As he spoke, the conviction within him grew, for he was learning to embrace the unrelenting embrace of divine purpose, regardless of human opinions. In that moment, Michal's heart ached as she felt further distance from her husband, for she could not embrace the beauty of her heart for the Lord. The promise of a lineage was unfolding, yet she stood detached from the very source of divine joy. And so the days passed, and with every gathering of Israel, David celebrated in the honor of the Lord, his love deepening for the ark and its significance. "O Lord," David would often pray, "make me a vessel for your glory, that through me countless generations may know your name." Among the shadows, unseen forces watched, knowing that God's plan was woven intricately, a tapestry of redemption stretching far beyond the present trials. And among David's sons, even more mysteries lay, waiting to be unraveled in the fullness of time. Thus the hearts of the people yearned, and the hope of a coming king lingered in the air, for God was unfurling His sovereign will in a dance of unfolding promises, a lineage born for greatness, revealing more than mere kingship, but the very essence of salvation itself. And the nation whispered among themselves, "What greater truths shall yet be uncovered in this journey, according to His wondrous design?" And it came to pass, after many days of rejoicing in the presence of the Lord, that David sat in his house, pondering the great deeds of the Almighty. He recounted the victories granted to him, the mercies shown throughout his reign, and a thought came upon him, an earnest desire to build a house for the Lord. So he summoned his faithful friend Nathan, the prophet, and spoke unto him, saying, "See now, I dwell in a house of cedar, but the ark of God dwells within curtains." Nathan listened as David expressed his fervent wish, yet the prophet pondered deeply in his heart. That night, as David lay in his chamber, the word of the Lord came unto Nathan in a dream. "Go and speak to my servant David, saying, Thus saith the Lord, Shall you build me a house for me to dwell in? I took you from the sheepfold, from following the sheep, to be ruler over my people Israel, and I have been with you wherever you have gone." In the morning, Nathan arose and went to David with the message bestowed upon him. Hear to the voice of the Lord, O king. You shall not build a house for him, but rather he shall build a house for you." David's heart swelled with gratitude as Nathan continued, "For your seed will I establish forever, and I will be your father, and you shall be my son. Your kingdom shall endure before me for all time. This shall be the covenant of the Lord." David understood the great weight of this promise, and he went into the house of the Lord with humbled spirit. He prayed, "O Lord God, who am I, and what is my house, that you have brought me hitherto? And yet this was a small thing in your sight, O God, for you have spoken of your servant's house for a great while to come. Let your name be magnified forever." In that moment, David felt the overwhelming touch of divine presence, and his spirit soared, for he recognized the unfolding of God's perfect plan. His lineage would remain everlasting, and through his sons the Messiah was to come. But unbeknownst to David, Michal watched him from afar. Her heart stirred not with joy, but with resentment. She perceived his awe as weakness, and in her mind rebellion brewed against this divine pronouncement. "What merit is there in dancing before the Almighty?" she thought bitterly. "What manner of king revels in such humility?" Days turned into weeks, and peace reigned in Israel as a cloud of promise surrounded David's throne. As he ruled with wisdom endowed by God, battles were won, and the nation flourished under his reign. The people whispered among themselves, "Great is our king! Who can stand against the might of Israel?" Yet, in secret, there loomed an unseen desire. Unforgiveness gripped Michal's heart, for she could not bend unto the greatness of God's plan. As David's sons grew, the promise of the everlasting covenant hovered over their futures, and Michal's spirit festered with doubts. Moreover, the enemies of Israel watched these unfolding events with unrest, for they knew that this house, a lineage destined for greatness, would challenge their wicked reign. And in the shadows, plans of strife began to stir, hidden from the eyes of man, yet known to the God who rules over all. In such times of growing anticipation and concealed tension, the hearts of those favored by God awaited the revelations yet to come. "What will be the fulfillment of these words spoken to David?" they asked one another. "Will the promise endure even unto generations beyond?" Thus, the echoes of David's covenant resounded through the halls of history, poised to reveal greater truths that would transform not only a kingdom, but the very course of salvation itself. As whispers of hope filled the air, the people longed for the day when the fullness of God's plan would be made manifest, and a king greater than David would emerge, one who would reign forever. What greater mysteries remained hidden within the fabric of God's design? And it came to pass in the season of tranquility that David became restless. The promises of the Lord filled his heart, yet a longing to comprehend the depths of God's will urged him onward. One evening he gathered the mighty men of valor who had stood by him through trials and triumphs, and he spoke to them of the covenant the Lord had made with him regarding his house. "Brothers, hear me," said David, his voice steady. "The Lord has declared that my lineage shall be everlasting. A house he shall build for me. But what does this mean for us? What is the destiny of our people? We are called to be a light, to be a nation unto the Lord." His words kindled the spirits of his warriors, and they pledged their lives to protect the kingdom that the Almighty upheld. However, among them a shadow stirred. Absalom, his son, heard of the king's words with a tempest brewing within him. There was ambition in his heart, a desire for honor that eclipsed the love for his father. As the days rolled by, the seasons turned, and Absalom's discontent morphed into cunning. He began to take counsel with those of discontented heart in Israel, subtly planting seeds of rebellion. "Why should you serve a king who dances before the ark? Why not have a leader who will champion your rights?" His words spread like wildfire, igniting the passions of the people who grew weary of David's humility. In the midst of this turmoil, Michal, caught in the web of her bitter thoughts, pondered her brother's rise. She feared what her husband might do, for the pain of feeling overshadowed by God's favor upon David and his lineage weighed heavily upon her. Yet in her heart she remembered the joy of the Lord, and as much as the turmoil consumed her, there was a flicker of hope that perhaps reconciliation could be found. Should she confront her bitterness? Meanwhile, God watched over Israel with divine wisdom. As he had once declared to David, "I will be your father, and you shall be my son," so too did he know the hearts of men led astray by pride. The days grew darker, and the promise which was intended to be a cornerstone of peace now bore the potential for strife. In this moment of brewing conflict, Nathan the prophet returned to the court of David, sensing that the winds had changed. "Do not fear, O king," he spoke. "The Lord is with you still, and even in human folly, his plan is unwavering." Nathan sought the face of God, asking for wisdom that he might illuminate the truth to the king amidst the encroaching shadows. On that night, as David rested, the Lord spoke, "Arise, David, for I have seen your heart, and I am with you in this tempest. Not by might nor by power shall salvation come, but by my Spirit." Thus David awoke, knowing he could not combat the shifting tides alone. He must return to the foundation of his strength, the very covenant made with him. He knelt before the Lord, arms outstretched, and cried out, "O Lord, let your will be done. Even in our tumult, may your promises bear forth fruit, for I trust in your unfailing love." And in that moment of vulnerability, the heavens shifted, and a promise was woven anew. Unbeknownst to David, the very trials that loomed would usher in greater revelations of God's perfect plan. What would emerge from the heart of rebellion? Would the promise endure the test of treachery? For the God who guided David was working behind the scenes, orchestrating destinies and shaping hearts, unveiling a mechanism of grace deeper than David could yet fathom. What greater purpose awaited those who would believe in the unfolding tapestry of God's sovereign will? And it came to pass that as the sun rose over the hills of Judah, David received word of Absalom's growing influence among the people. The murmurs of discontent had escalated into cries for change. And within the heart of David, the weight of grief mingled with the hope of God's promise, for he had learned through trials to seek the Lord at all times. "Gather the trusted among us," David commanded, his voice bearing the burden of a father's sorrow mingled with a king's resolve. His closest adviser, Ahithophel, stood ready to heed the king's call. However, the winds seemed to shift even in the council chamber, as Ahithophel's counsel began to align with Absalom's cause, revealing a fracture that both pained and perplexed David. That night, David poured out prayers to the Lord, lamenting, "O Lord, how can I bear this? My son, whom I love, has turned against me." As he prayed, a thought rose in his spirit, a whisper of assurance, "Your lineage remains secure." Strengthened by this, he resolved to protect not only his throne, but also to seek reconciliation where possible. Meanwhile, in the streets of Jerusalem, Absalom charmed the hearts of the people. "If only I were judge in the land," he proclaimed with fervor, "I would give you justice." And the people nodded and murmured in agreement, for they sought a king who would elevate their voices and offer them the reign of freedom, forgetting David's heart, which had always desired their good. A heavy silence fell upon Michal as she watched her brothers rise to power, a shadow intertwining with her faith. Conflicted, she sought her husband, hoping some of his wisdom would burden his heart for reconciliation. "O David," she said, "is it not written that he who stirs strife shall reap the whirlwind? Consider your prayers and your offerings. Do they not call forth unity?" Yet David, though heartbroken by Absalom's actions, spoke with a whisper of prophecy. "It was foretold that I would face opposition, yet the Lord shall make a way where there seems to be none." In that very moment, a messenger arrived from the wilderness, breathless and wide-eyed.
"O King David, Absalom has declared himself king in Hebron." The news was a dagger piercing through the fabric of David's heart, for he understood that the loyalty of Israel was tilting toward betrayal. David gathered his men, the elites of valor who had fought beside him. "We must flee, for in this time of great betrayal the city of Jerusalem may crumble under Absalom's ambition." With heavy hearts but unwavering resolve, they obeyed. The kingdom that once stood triumphant now faced a tempest of treachery. As dusk fell upon the land, they departed, ascending the Mount of Olives, weeping as they prayed. David's heart was heavy, yet he remembered the faithfulness of the Lord. "Even in shadow, you are my light," he cried, tears flowing, his spirit intertwined with both anguish and hope. And God looked upon David with favor, for he knew the trials ahead were but the forging of a deeper understanding of his covenant. The unfolding of destiny was at hand, and the Lord prepared to reveal his might through the weakness of man. Indeed, what greater purpose was hidden in this tapestry of pain and pride? What revelation awaited amidst upheaval and turmoil? For the heart of the Almighty was poised to reveal a grace transcendent, one that would extend to his chosen people and beyond, echoing through the ages. And it came to pass that after years of heartache and turmoil, the day of reckoning dawned upon Israel. Absalom, now firmly seated upon the throne of betrayal, sought to solidify his reign through cunning and cruelty. Yet, unbeknownst to him, the divine hand was weaving the fabric of a greater plan. David stood on the outskirts of his beloved city, stripped of his crown, but not of his faith. In his heart the words of the Lord resounded, "Your lineage will endure." He knew the path ahead was fraught with trials, yet he anchored his spirit in the promises of God. "O Lord, you are my refuge and strength," he cried out, the weight of his sorrow tempered by the certainty of God's unwavering purpose. Those loyal to David rallied around him, their hearts aflame with devotion. "We shall reclaim what belongs to our true King, for our eyes have seen the hand of God move through his servant," they proclaimed. United in their determination, they pledged to honor the very covenant that had sustained them through every storm, embodying fidelity in the face of uncertainty. Yet a tempest brewed within the palace walls, and tragedy struck closer to home. As Absalom's reign grew in power, the consequences of his actions unraveled. The words of Nathan echoed in David's mind, "Your lineage will not fail." With that promise tucked firmly within his heart, David prepared for a confrontation with his son, driven not by vengeance but by love and the desire for reconciliation. In the appointed time, when the clash between father and son seemed inevitable, David approached Absalom with a gentle heart. "O Absalom, my son, he wept, "would that I had died instead of you. Do not let pride blind you to the love that seeks your heart." But Absalom, fueled by ambition and anger, could not hear the cries of his father. He stood firm in his rebellion, unaware that the very throne he coveted would lead to his own downfall. The battle soon arose, a clash of former allies turned foes, and as the dust settled, the blood of betrayal stained the ground. Yet in the midst of the chaos, the promise of God's faithfulness emerged victorious. A mysterious turn of events found Absalom ensnared in the very tangle of his ambition, and in an instant the fierce heart of the young leader was stilled. The sorrow that swept through David at this news was not one of hatred, but of profound grief for a son lost to the darkness of pride and power. "O Absalom, my son," David lamented, "if only you had turned your heart to the Lord. I weep not for loss of kingdom, but for the distance that separated us." The weight of his anguish reverberated through the land, reminding the hearts of Israel that the king's greatest sorrow was not the loss of a throne, but the hope dashed in the life of one who could have known the unfathomable love of God. As days turned to weeks in the aftermath, the people gathered in reverent silence,
understanding that the lineage of David had not ended in tragedy, but transformed through the flicker of divine mercy. David led them with renewed spirit, proclaiming the faithfulness of God and nurturing their shared grief into greater trust in the Lord's unwavering grip over their destinies. In the sacred space of mourning and remembrance, they sought the Lord earnestly. As they prayed, a resolve strengthened within them. They would walk in the path of covenant, lifting their eyes toward the promise of a steadfast king yet to come, a lineage embodied not merely in power, but in righteousness. And indeed, through these trials, the anticipation of the Messiah grew brighter, echoing the ancient promise, "Someone from David's line shall reign forever." Through the bitter and sweet, the heart of God revealed His sovereign will, sealing the covenant with grace that would resound through generations. "Let us remember," David urged those who gathered around him, "the Lord is our God, who never abandons His promise nor His people. The trials we face are but a part of His greater design, and with every step we are ushered closer to salvation." With this, the foundation of hope was firmly established within Israel, a community bound not by the fleeting power of kings, but by the unbreakable covenant of love from their God. Peace settled over the city restored, heralding the dawn of a new chapter rooted in faith, unmarred by strife. As the days melded into seasons, David prepared for the future, leading his people with wisdom and humility, forever thankful for the lessons learned under the weight of God's mighty hand. He knew that the story of his lineage would not only hold kings, but would also usher the Messiah, the true king whose reign would never fade. In the hearts of those who believed, the whispers of the kingdom echoed from generation to generation, each resounding with the truth of God's promise fulfilled, reminding all that the path to redemption would be born through hope, love, and unshakable faith. And so, let every heart echo this final call. Come and take hold of the promise that extends beyond even the greatest tomorrows. The story continues, carried forth in the spirit of unity and grace, rooted in the unending love of the Almighty. If this journey of faith has touched your heart, you need to subscribe now to stay connected to God's Word and the continuation of powerful biblical stories. This is the moment to help spread biblical truth. Leave a like now so that others may see God's light and hope. Comment below with your spiritual reflections and share in the powerful testimony of how this story impacted your faith. Do not wait even one more second to share this message with at least 5 friends who need to hear God's truth today.